Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Saturday morning. Here to do a Q&A. We love doing these in the off season because you guys, we don't necessarily touch on all of the topics you guys want. We have our own stuff to handle each week, but we like doing the Saturday shows. Let you guys kind of fire off some takes, fire off some questions, and we'll touch on as many as we can. As always, a super chat question will ensure that your question or take gets on the show. So those are always appreciated, encouraged, but not necessary. And joining me to do all of that today is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up? How are you doing today?
I am doing very well, but I've spent many more hours than I would have liked just thinking over our mock draft process and what happened and this overall offensive offseason. We were talking before the show about this, but I'm very curious how the chat feels. It really does feel like the worst offseason to need offensive anything that I can remember the Chargers having in a while. And that's assuming Higgins even officially hits free agency and that some of these guys might be cut or Trey Smith hits free agency. If you're looking at like PFF's free agent rankings for receivers, okay, so Higgins is the prize. Even with that, he might come back to Cincinnati. And with that, he's an injury history. Maybe you can work with that, but that is something. Okay, who's your next guy on the rankings? Chris Godwin, coming off of an ankle dislocation that ended his season. Amari Cooper, who had 41 receiving yards in 3 postseason games recently. Stephon Diggs off of an ACL tear. DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown. Juwan Johnson is a top 40 player in this off. Like no disrespect to Juwan Johnson, but it's kind of the groups that we're considering here. We looked at the draft, right? We tried to, because people were like, hey, we need to add offensive firepower to the Chargers. But if it wasn't Loveland in the first round, it almost feels like it's worse than when the Chargers were picking in 2023. And I mean, even then they had at least, say Flowers, Addison. Of course, they went with Quentin Johnston. It feels worse than that at 22 this year. And the center class isn't great. The receiver class is not great. You and I both feel the tight end class is generally overrated.
Yeah.
It's a rough year to need things on offense, to the point where I'm genuinely concerned. I've been racking my brain around how the heck do you get this offense to go from what it was last year to something that can compete in the postseason. And you can make, like you mentioned before the show, Loveland can transform your tight end room. And I think you can take a marginal step forward on offense. But is that a home run selection that's going to vault you to the top? No. Is there, and then what do you do on defense? Okay, great, you fix that. What are you going to do against all these receivers? And Ethia has a question for us about the defense later.
Yeah.
But what do you do then? Okay, so you pick average, unexciting, fine prospects on offense in this draft. What are you doing on defense? So I'm just having a very difficult time trying to figure out what the heck the Chargers should do, because this just feels like at this point they are going to have to make 10 $5 to $8 million moves versus go after any of these big ones, because there's not much out there. And how much does that move the needle for you? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a needle moving off season for the offense, like Tyler's mentioning, but I think you can take the moves from last year, your Hayden Hurst, your DJ Charks, your Simi Fehokos, your Gus Edwards, and you can upgrade in those areas. And the one strength of the free agency class that I think is legit is the guard market. I know everybody wants Trey Smith, but it sounds like he's going to get like $25-26 million a year. Does he fit the Chargers? 100%. Does he fit the Chargers cap sheet? I don't really know. But there's a world where you could go get like Will Fries, for example, who is his BFF's second highest graded guard. And then like a James Daniels, Will Fries, you pay $15 million per year. James Daniels, you do kind of like a 1 year, $6 million deal. That's what PFF has. And you upgrade both guard spots right off the bat. And Will Fries is not a star, but he's like a very quality above average guard. And same thing with James Daniels, who's probably a little bit more closer towards like the average side. But that would be a drastic change for your offensive line. And so Nate Tice from The Athletic, now of Yahoo Sports, always compares like sometimes you have to go from tomato cans to serviceable, and that's like a really, really big upgrade for your offense, even if it's not like a ceiling changer. And so I think those are some of the moves that we'll see the Chargers make. They got it next to nothing from a production standpoint from their ex receivers, right? Like Simi Fehoko, DJ Chark, like there was nothing there. So even if you're signing there is an aging Amari Cooper, you can, and you can get 500 and 600 yards from Amari Cooper. That's a significant upgrade, right? So I think there's a lot of moves like that out there to help this offense get to a much more workable point. But I don't know, outside of a T Higgins or a Trey Smith, are you really changing the ceiling of your offense with the draft or with free agency? I don't know if those moves are out there.
Yeah.
A lot of people will bring up, DK Metcalf. I kind of covered this on my own, and somebody asked me today, like, well, what if you trade a 3rd round pick on Zion Johnson for DK Metcalf? Why would the Seahawks do that? and I'm higher on Zion than probably anybody else still to this day, which is a problem that I have for sure. But there's just not that many guys out there that can change the ceiling of your offense. So can you make some smart improvements? Yes, I think that is possible. But, I was listening to a podcast earlier, I think it was the Mina Kimes show, and she was saying like, oh, like the Chargers just probably need to go get dudes on offense and outdude the other teams because of the Greg Roman aspect of things. Well, what if T Higgins stays in Cincinnati? What if Trey Smith stays in Kansas City, or the Bears offered Trey Smith $28 million, right? You just don't get those opportunities. So it's a tough time to need offensive upgrades for sure in both draft and free agency. So outside of free agency guards, I don't know really where the Chargers are going to make like significant ceiling changing moves.
Yeah, and they can get to a higher cap number for sure, but not that the Patriots and the Raiders are grand organizations right now. But they did just go get Vrabel and Pete Carroll, which does move the needle, I think, for some
Bears have Ben Johnson now.
Connections. Right. So there are players who might want to go play for those teams, and then they can also pay them $5 million more a year than the Chargers can. Again, not that these teams are a year away by any means, but Patriots with a rookie quarterback can spend a lot. The Commanders are 3rd in cap space. Teams they just made the NFC Championship game. So what players want to go play there? So it's just so tricky. I don't know where the Chargers are going to end up with who they can attract. Not that it's a bad spot by any means. They have plenty of money, but when guys re-sign, they stick with their teams, or the people are franchise tagged or whatever, and then they have to outcompete other teams with cap space. I don't know, man. And the one other thing, we talk about Joe Ortiz, and he's amazing. Now, he didn't have a ton of money to spend on the offensive side of the football, but there really wasn't much on the offensive side where money went there on these lower tier free agents. And it didn't really pan out in most instances. It didn't with Bozeman. It didn't with Chark. It didn't with Hurst. Thankfully, it did with Disley. It didn't with Edwards. It did with Dobbins. We'll see if he comes back. So I do have a bit more reservation about Ortiz's ability to get something on offense or Greg Roman to then elevate that. Because, Ortiz sent Jesse Minter whatever towards the end of the season, and everything worked. You can spend $8 million this year on the defense, and Jesse Minter go, okay, thanks a lot, but I'm sure it'll be a top 15 unit no matter what.
Yeah.
Greg Roman, I don't know. So I don't know. Our approach to the mock was, defense, because that was the best players available on that first round. And some people hated it. I can't take you seriously. Look, guys, Derek Harmon in the second round, you better kiss whoever's butt you need to make sure that happens. That would be incredible.
Yeah. Hilarious that PFF has Derek Harmon as a 3rd rounder. And then I was listening to Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers, and they took him at 46. And they're like, this is awesome. And I'm like, what about your list?
Yeah. Tony says, and this is potentially true, we don't know much about the receivers and tight end positions because both PFF and CBS Sports
strongly disagree about the tight end class. Strongly disagree.
So the tight end class is the one I've done more work on. Receiver takes a long time to get through.
Yeah.
it's not that you can't find a guy, but compared to, let's say, the last two classes, which was an embarrassment of riches,
Yeah.
like no shot. Like you should not have been able to get Lad McConkey in round 2.
Yeah.
But you
Last year's
could.
class was awesome, man.
Yeah, I mean it was littered with talent and guys that were contributing. This is, by the time the Chargers are picking, it is worse than the 2023 class, in my opinion, which had some depth to it. But by the time the Chargers are picking, there is no Addison unless Egbuka falls, which is possible. There's no Addison. There's no Flowers. Yes, there's a Quentin Johnston, but I wouldn't take that in the first round.
Yeah, I think if you need a receiver in the top 15, you're probably feeling really good about yourself. Ted McMillan. I tend to think Travis Hunter is probably better suited as a corner, but he can at least, maybe give you 15 snaps on offense and kind of be a gadget guy. I really like Luther Burden. He's not a fit for the Chargers because he plays majority of his snaps in the slot. And then you mentioned Egbuka. I'm a big fan of as well. So I like the top of this draft. But there's a significant drop off, in my opinion, from Egbuka to like the next guy, which for me right now is probably Jaden Higgins.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're a little bit different on him. A lot of people like the both of the TCU guys. I don't know, man. Like I'm always skeptical of receivers in like the air raid system, and Savion Williams, the receiver from TCU's, 6'3" and 230, and he runs hard and stuff like that, but there's not a whole lot of nuance there, and just same thing with Jack Beck. So I don't love this receiver class. I think you can find value. I think you can find specific roles. Like we took Trey Harris in our mock. Matthew Golden is another one I like from Dome. That's a good point. Matthew Golden's solid. I think you can find specific roles, but last year's group, man, there were like 10 guys deep where I was like, this guy could be a wide receiver 1 for a team. And we saw that obviously with Ladd and, Xavier Leggett came on strong for the Panthers at the end of the season, stuff like that. So it's just different. The tight end class, the volume is vast. There are a lot of tight ends in this draft. But if you're making me compare this tight end class to the 2023 class, where maybe Tyler Warren would be tight end 1 in that class as well for me. But then you get to Colson Lovin, and I think there's a massive drop off after that. Like I don't think I would take any of these guys in this class over Tucker Kraft, over Sam Laporta. Like I don't think that's even a conversation at all. And so are there more players you could choose from? Sure, that's probably true. It's better than last year's tight end class, which really only had like Theo Johnson, and that was like about it. But I just like, if you take Elijah Arroyo, who I is probably my choice for like the next guy, just because he's an athletic freak. But we talked about this during the mock, like 80% of his receiving production is like trick plays and tight end leak and like, very schemed up touches, and same thing with Harold Fannin. Honestly, just the volume is kind of cranked up to the next notch. So yeah, I don't think you can get a real like future tight end 1 in this class unless you are taking Tyler Warren or Colson Loveland. I don't see the receiving upside. I don't see the blocking upside. And particularly for the Chargers, people are like, well, take Mason Taylor, take so-and-so. The Chargers are like, they will flex a tight end to the slot, but you have to block. You have to be a capable blocker in order to play in this offense. And these guys who are, 6'3", 220, like they're not blocking in this offense. It's just not happening. So Chargers fans, I think, would be wise to not buy into the hype of the tight end class, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm starting to look at, like, compared to previous classes, how these guys stack up. And I have no general opinion yet, but I don't know. Nothing just quite stands out to me. Everyone's got a comparison to a guy from a previous class, but everyone's like, oh, this guy's an Isaiah Likely type, or this guy's a, I don't know, whatever type. And even the numbers don't bear out that way.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one. Although I didn't realize Brock Bowers averaged 0.46 yards per route run versus man coverage, which would be like the worst of the last 3 classes.
Interesting.
Would have fooled me. It must have been a
terrible, because he was getting a lot of like actual corners versus tight ends. You see a lot more safeties and linebackers. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's not an end all be all by any means. Clearly, he did just fine. But yeah, it's rough.
Yeah. The good news for the Chargers, I think you can really shore up your 2 guard spots in free agency. And I think that plus like marginal upgrades at your X spot, at your tight end spot, I think is enough to get this offense to a much better spot than where they were at last year. I don't think like the stars are going to happen for the Chargers on offense this year. Like I think they're going to find more reliable players, but not, those ceiling players. And for the Chargers, I think that's enough, honestly. I think you can change the ceiling of your defense this offseason with free agency and with the draft. That's not having an offense, but you can raise the floor and you can ensure that performances like the Houston Texans game are less on the table by making those marginal upgrades at X receiver, your guard spots, your tight end spot. Like they can get better at those options for sure. But it's tough to find like legit stars at those options.
Yeah, I will say, and you mentioned the offensive line in free agency, you can definitely flip your entire run game this offseason. And that is very possible. Maybe not necessarily with the blocking tight end, but with the running backs, with the interior offensive linemen. In theory, Scott Matlock takes a step forward. Yeah, you can flip the Chargers run game. Can Greg Roman? We'll see. But in terms of talent, yeah, they definitely can.
Yeah, that is the one spot where in the draft you want to take Ashton Jinty or Marion Hampton at 22, that can change the ceiling of your running back room in a hurry, which the NFL Stock Exchange guys did do. They had them taking Ashton Jinty at 22. So I haven't watched the corner class a ton. I've watched like 2 or 3 draft prospects there. I've watched like 2 or 3 safety prospects there, but I feel like enough of the top players at each position to feel like which positions are the strongest in the draft. And for me, that is edge, defensive tackle, and running back. Those are the 3 best classes in this draft. And for the Chargers, maybe you take your tight end one of the future in the first round, and then you just go after those 3 positions because they're the best positions, and those are the big upgrades you make in the draft. But then we're having another conversation like, well, what about long-term center? What about this? What about that?
Yeah.
The Chargers are still a ways away from my roster standpoint. I think, we'll see a lot in free agency, but those are the 3 positions where I got to come out of this draft class relatively early with a potential long-term starter there. So running back, tight end, edge, running back, defensive tackle, edge. Those are the strengths. Those are the 3 positions where I'm trying to pluck from the most.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. That was a long conversation, but I think a worthwhile conversation to have at this point in time, because we are, I think, 6 weeks away from the start of free agency. So we're a little over a month. That was a little misworded in the thumbnail by me, but no. January finally ended, the longest month ever. We are February 1st, so free agency is next month at this point in time. All right, so we'll get to some questions now for the rest of the time here. We do have a few super chats in, so you guys can go ahead and fire away. I'll try and scroll through as many as we can, but like I said, super chats are always encouraged and appreciated. And as always, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. If you're like me and maybe a little tired of the usual, fantasy sports where you're kind of stuck with certain players for the bulk of a season, like I have a coworker who does fantasy baseball. And I can't imagine like being stuck with baseball rosters for 162 games. He's started doing Prize Picks for baseball, and he loves it because he doesn't have to deal with that kind of constraint. So it's a great opportunity, great option if you just want to maybe jump in a couple times a week, if you want to jump in every now and then and just get in on some of the action. It's a very flexible, user-friendly platform. We're very appreciative and grateful for their partnership, and it's been a great time. So prizepicks.com/guilty is the best way to do that. prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty at checkout for deposit match up to $50 on your first deposit. And it does really genuinely help support the show. So if you haven't yet signed up, we do appreciate it if you guys would go at least put in one deposit for us, and then you'll find yourself like me kind of jumping in every single week. So prizepicks.com/guilty, best way to do that.
Yeah, tons of fun. They have a 0.5 passing yards more for Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Obviously, you've got a little over a week to get that done. So even if you're just here for football, go in on that. It feels like Saquon Barkley gets the more every week. So have at it with that one. all that stuff. My dad won the last in the AFC Championship game, and my dad's usually unlucky and maybe can't figure out a technology thing sometimes. Both these things he still figured out and won at Prize Picks. If you're a little hesitant because you don't have the best luck, or maybe it's maybe not sure how to figure out what to do, both my parents figured it out. I figured it out. Steven figured it out. Everybody that uses it figured it out. Clearly, many of you guys have figured it out because, as Steven says, it has greatly supported the show, and I appreciate it.
100%. 100%. All right, we'll get started with the Super Jets here. Our guy Theo kicking us off with two big ones. I think this is a two-parter from him, but he wanted to start with my boy Slater has not been signed yet. What are we doing? And Tyler, last show you responded to my top 5 defense comment by the wide receivers we play. Mm-hmm. He has a bold prediction coming. So we'll touch on the first one with Rashawn Slater. I expect that extension to happen. You know, it makes too much sense for the Chargers to get it done. Some people have said, like, well, what if they wait? You know, he's had some injuries, stuff like that. And that's true, right? But his 2 healthy seasons, he's been to the Pro Bowl. He's been to 1 All-Pro. Even when he was dealing with the 2 high ankle sprains 2 seasons ago at this point, still a highly above average left tackle. And when he's at his best, I think he is a top 3 left tackle in the sport. Took a big step forward in the run blocking department, I would say. And so it makes too much sense. And Daniel Popper has pointed this out in his articles and when he's been on other podcasts, right? Where right now he has a $19 million cap hit for 2025 because it's going to be his 5th-year option. But if you extend him, you can lower that to potentially like $6 or $7 or $8 million and essentially cut it in half. And so that's a very easy way for the Chargers to, you know, free up cap space. Now, the timing of this is a little tricky. You know, do the Chargers feel like they have to get this done before free agency, or is this kind of a before training camp thing? You know, it's kind of a different story. Obviously, the Chargers under Tom Telesco, they would wait until training camp to do these extensions, and maybe that's the case with this going forward. But for the Chargers with under Joe Ortiz, it's going to get done. I think it's just a matter of when. And I do expect him to be, you know, up there with Tristan Wirfs' contract as highest paid left tackle in the league because he's earned it, and that's kind of how the market works.
Yeah, he'll get it. I can't imagine the first thing that they do with a big contract with an internal player with Jim Harbaugh is go ditch the tackle. Like, we'll find another one. Like, I just do not see that happening at all. I don't care really when it gets done. It will get done. It'll get done.
Yeah. You know, some people have suggested, well, like, what if they, you know, go kick Joe Alt to left tackle and then they go sign like a right tackle on the cheap, you know, like a Morgan Moses type. That's a significant step down on your offensive line. And Jim Harbaugh said afterwards, they feel like they have the 2 best offensive tackles in the league. And that's probably not true. I think they have definitely a legit argument for best in the AFC. But given what Lane Johnson has continued to do, and you know, the Bucks tackle duo is probably ahead of them as well. But best in the AFC, I think, is very, very much in play. And for the Chargers, who, you know, tip of the spear, we're an offensive line organization, it makes 0 sense for either side to let Rashawn Slater, you know, play on his 5th-year option and then hit free agency next year. So an extension is going to happen. It's just a matter of when, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Regarding the second point from Athea here, when he asked about defense, the previous super chat, he asked about defense, and I mentioned the receivers. To me, you just have to look at the way the season ended, and you have to look at the loss prior to that against the Bucks, and then some other games for sure, where the Chargers just flat out didn't have an answer for a better X receiver.
Yeah.
Or just an elite receiver as is. Nico Collins, Mike Evans, who aren't even necessarily the 2 or 3 best receivers in the league. And they had no answer. They just could not stop them. And now we'll see what these other teams do in free agency. But, okay, you have A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins again, CeeDee Lamb, Brian Thomas, like Malik Neighbors. It's just a lot where at some point, Jesse Minter has been great. Sometimes there's just no answer for a guy who's far better than your defensive back talent.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that'll happen all the time. And it's not that the quarterbacks in each of these spots are great. But at some point, like, sometimes these guys just are better and they get open, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and he brings up Jamar Chase as part of his second one here. The Chargers did an admirable job against Jamar Chase, and then Cam Hart got injured, and it was like the floodgates open. And then also T. Higgins had 145 yards or whatever it was too. So there's so many teams in the NFL right now that have like a legit like top 10 receiver, and like you can make an argument for like 20 dudes, so they're top 10 receivers at this point in time. That's one of the reasons why I think that we could see the Chargers be a little bit more aggressive at corner in the free agency market. Maybe you go get a Carlton Davis or a DJ Reed type and kind of shore up that need for you, because we were just talking about the draft stuff, right? Like, where does corner fit in? I don't really know where you can really prioritize a corner outside of like a day 3 pick at this point, given the needs and the strengths of this draft class. So do they go pay for a free agent corner? I think is a legit possibility. And I think worst case scenario, I think Christian Fulton is a fine, backstop option if these other corners kind of price themselves to a point where the Chargers are a little bit uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I know people bring up Christian Fulton as somebody who kind of like declined in the back half of the season, but you look at the numbers, like the numbers are really, really solid, man. Like forcing completion percentage, pass breakups, all that stuff, really, really good. He plays the run very, very well. They're obviously comfortable with him. So I think that's kind of like worst case scenario. And then hopefully you obviously get steps forward from Cam Hart and Tariq still. But I would not be surprised if they go get, a Carlton Davis or a DJ Reed and just kind of like shore up that cornerback spot.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that at all.
And then his bold prediction here is that to fix the offense, he's going to give up 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks to go trade for Jamar Chase, who there's rumors that he's going to hit $40 million in free agency coming out of Mobile, by the way. And honestly, like, I don't blame them. Like, I think Jamar Chase is worth that kind of money. So the Bengals are I understand this is a bold prediction from Athir. The Bengals are not giving up Jamar Chase. Like, he's Joe Burrow's guy. He's their best player, I think, objectively speaking. Like, Jamar Chase is going to stay in Cincinnati, but I appreciate the creativity from Athir.
What I appreciate is that you actually gave an offer of multiple firsts and seconds.
Yeah, usually we get these and it's like, oh, it's a second round pick and Zion Johnson. Like,
I'll trade like a bag of Girl Scout cookies and like a free car wash for these players. So I appreciate actual investment here.
Yeah, no, that was a good one for sure. But yeah, he's staying in Cincinnati. I think there's a good chance that the Bengals retain both of the receivers for at least another year. But we'll see. Ryan Kensinger wants to know, how do we feel about the Chargers re-signing punter J.K. Scott?
Mixed, I think. Now, I have no idea who's a punter free agent. I have no idea who's a punter in the draft. So I couldn't tell you if there's an easy upgrade somewhere or not. As a holder, clearly not an issue. The operation with Cameron Dicker generally is excellent. Usually not an issue there. The punting is just so hit or miss. There's maybe 2 games a year where you go, holy crap, who is that? J.K. Scott, man, you're crushing it today.
Yeah.
And then it feels like every time they're within like the 10-yard line to the end zone, their own end zone, here's a 28-yard punt. Here's a 32-yard punt. It's like, dude. And it's always in the worst times. I don't know if that's just me remembering it incorrectly, but it feels like every time they're backed up and the Chiefs are on the other side and they need a punt, J.K. Scott, it's 28 yards. And it's never because of the coverage. The coverage is always pretty much excellent on special teams. It's just meh on some instances. So he's I think average overall, sometimes has good games. I think many times has rough moments in key moments. So I don't know. I'm indifferent.
Yeah, I'm indifferent. I will say, to J.K. Scott's credit, he, for the most part, executes what Ryan Ficken wants, I think, which is hang time and limiting return. So just pulling up Pro Football Focus right now, he was second in the league in average hang time of 4.62. And then his return percentage was 9th best in the league at 39%. So Ryan Ficken very clearly wants the ball to go very high and not be returned. Like that, I think those are his main goals as a special teams coach when it comes to punt coverage. And generally speaking, the Chargers have had pretty good gunners, like you mentioned. Simi Fehoko kind of took the shine there this year, but Dean Leonard's been a good gunner. Jasir Taylor's had good gunning performance in the past. AJ Finley last year. But it's the inconsistency. So if the Chargers can find a more consistent punter, I'm all for it. I'm probably not paying somebody, given their needs. So can the Chargers, bring back J.K. Scott on a 1-year deal and then bring in like an undrafted free agent punter and provide some competition? I think that's probably where I would go. I don't think it's a really coincidence that some of his best games this past season were when they would bring in punters for tryouts. I feel like that happened like 4 or 5 times throughout the year. But I don't know. I don't have any strong opinions about punters. This is definitely a question you want to send to Alex Katzen. Alex 100%. Katzen will tell you who the 10 best punters are in the draft. Like he is that. He is there already. So my opinions are like, can they find an upgrade? Probably, but do I want to pay for one? No. Do I want to draft one super highly? No. So bring him back on a cheap deal and bring in an undrafted free agent, and I'm probably okay with it.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Like you said, ask Alex Katzen. He knows.
Yeah. Next one in here from Putts and Bolts. I love that. Assuming he's a big golfer here. He says that assuming Higgins is a no-go, what other free agent wide receivers do you like to pair with a tight end like Loveland besides Darius Slayton? Would like to have the budget for a Filer 2.0.
I like that. I like nice mention of Matt Filer. Didn't exactly work out in the long run, but had good moments. I think was stability for a while.
The 2021 season was very, very good.
Yeah, and then it wasn't. But such has been the Chargers, I think, offensive line under Telesco. Who is? So now we're getting into so not Slayton. I mean, at some point, isn't it just Keenan Allen? Like, isn't that just your next best option? Like, what or Mike Williams? I mean, what else is there a receiver for a more inexpensive? I mean, Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, one of the receivers that I think does make sense for them is Hollywood Brown. The Chargers are obviously very familiar with him from his days in Baltimore. And looking up in, the Chargers like obviously need help versus man coverage, right? Like that's been one of the things that we've seen throughout the course of the season, and we've seen throughout, obviously looking at these wide receivers. So yards per route run versus man coverage, Hollywood Brown actually averaged 1.96 in 2023, which among the group of free agent wide receivers is third best. He is a smaller wide receiver, so some people might think he plays in the slot, but he plays mostly outside. He's mostly kind of a Z receiver who can play in the slot from time to time. Makes it a little awkward with like the whole Quentin Johnson aspect of things, which is kind of the theme of the offseason there. But he's a vertical threat. He can stretch the field. He can win versus man coverage in the intermediate. He's a guy that I think makes a lot of sense. Pro Football Focus is projecting a 2-year, $9 million contract for him. So that's kind of more palatable. I definitely would prefer a Darius Slayton over him. Slayton's younger and doesn't have kind of the lack of size issues that Hollywood Brown does. But Hollywood Brown, I think, does make some sense for this team, just given their need for a deep threat and somebody who can win versus man coverage.
Yeah. People are mentioning Godwin. It's so funny to look at his charting where it's like, okay, this year he's played 2/3 of his snaps or 70% of his snaps in the slot. This year it's the opposite. For the most part, he's been a slot guy. I think there's enough inside outside there. I'm not super worried. To me, it's the $20 million a year for a guy coming off like a season-ending dislocation. I don't know if I can jump in and justify $20 million a year. Granted, that might not be the case in the end.
Yeah,
but $20 million a year to a guy coming off a season-ending ankle dislocation who has had a history of injuries. I don't know, man. That's just a big risk. And this isn't a great free agent class. It's not a great receiver class, in my opinion. So guys like that will get paid maybe more than they should. No offense to them. Like, get your money. But because there aren't many guys, there's kind of a bidding more. So it's just dicey for me. If it is $20 million a year for a guy with a season-ending injury, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not paying Chris Godwin $20 million. I think it's a little clunky of a fit. I think it's a great great football player, right? I don't see that one happening. Good call by you. You know, we've seen kind of the guard market explode for this very reason. It's not been, very good guard draft classes. And so when you get somebody who can hit, you pay them $20 million per year, like a Robert Hunt type. So I think these receiver contracts for the free agent projections are probably going to end up a little bit more just because there's a limited aspect of there. I'm not totally opposed to bringing in Amari Cooper. I mentioned him earlier because he is like a legit X receiver. Very clearly not the same player. And Buffalo really didn't use him all that much as a wide receiver. So I'm not opposed there. DeAndre Hopkins, same kind of thing. Those are two X receivers that I think would be good. Just from like a vibe standpoint, I kind of want Matt Collins on this team.
Dude, 100%. I wanted him whenever he left the Raiders.
Yeah, he's like an awesome blocker, plays special teams. His average depth of target the past 3 seasons has been like 16.5. So he's just like a chuck it deep, go play special teams, block your ass off type. Like,
yeah,
he's like a juiced up version of Simi Fehoko, and I think that's worthwhile for this specific team to bring in. So
yeah,
can you go get like Hollywood Brown and Matt Collins, and then maybe you draft somebody on day 3, and that's how you kind of upgrade your receiver room?
Yeah,
I'm not totally opposed to that kind of room, but paying Darius Slayton $15 million, if that's what it costs, I'm not really interested. Chris Godwin 20, not really interested. So that it's these receiver contracts, if they get out of hand, like I'm not about it. Like PFF projects T Higgins at 28, but if he actually hits free agency, like if the Bengals just do not retain him, he's going to get like $34 or $35 million just because of the lack of receiving talent in free agency and in the draft.
Yeah. This did cross my mind this morning. I know it's not a super chat, but Rick mentioned his thoughts on re-signing Palmer. I think it is time to move on. At the same time, I would understand the security of bringing him back. And again, not that he's an elite player by any means. He's not going to change your offense, clearly, because he was on it.
Yeah.
And missed a bunch of it. But I understand with some security going into the draft. I wouldn't mind it. It would make sense.
It would make sense. I would still like to see them, try and get an upgrade at wide receiver too. The Chargers cannot just like run their main 3 back and then sign like a Matt Collins type, like I was just talking about. If you bring in a Hollywood Brown and he's your wide receiver too, and then you have Palmer and Quentin and Matt Collins, like I think that's a decent step forward. But I'm looking more for the roles here, because if you do that, you have like the same kind of problems where you don't really have like somebody who can consistently play X receiver for you. So and Palmer's never really been a special teams player, so I do think because of the injuries it makes it tough for me to like really think about bringing him back, because he was injured again last season with like 3 different things, and he's always been somebody that's outside of his rookie season when he was fully healthy, he's, a knee sprain, a shoulder sprain, an ankle sprain, tricep, whatever. It's just kind of tough for me to be like, okay, yeah, like bring this guy back. Although when he is on the field, the numbers are a lot better than Chargers fans acknowledge. Well, the bulk of Chargers fans, I would say.
Yeah, likely gone. We didn't even have him as a top 10 option to bring back because we think he is gone. But I would understand why he'd be back ahead of what could be a rough offseason of acquisitions.
Yeah. Miss Andrea Soon in here. Prize picks. Let's go with a big super chat. We always appreciate her jumping in here and supporting.
Yes. He's kept our sponsorship afloat.
Yeah. Yeah. Our families have done a lot of the legwork there for sure. My brother uses Prize Picks every single week. So shout out to him. Have you guys talked about potential away games? I know you go to obviously a bulk of home games.
But, we have mentioned Brazil.
Okay.
If that's not technically it's a home game, but that's a very much an away game. We'll see on that one. TBD on all the circumstances and getting there. I have not been. I've been out of the country to different continents, but I haven't been to Brazil, which is not a continent. I'm not saying it's a continent. For people about to comment that. Someone was going to. I just know that. So I know my continents. Anyway, I'm not incontinent. What else? I don't know. What are the away games again? So Chargers away opponents, Jacksonville, Miami. Okay, well, I wonder if there's back-to-back. That'd be fun. Raiders, Denver.
I wonder if the Chargers do Brazil, would they still do, because so the Chargers obviously did kind of the road trip thing with the Panthers and the Steelers game. And you can actually request that each offseason.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if the Chargers would request that if they are also doing the Brazil thing.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I mean, they do have a stretch. I'm curious how it would pair up, but Cowboys, I'm sorry. Giants, Dolphins, Jaguars, Tennessee technically kind of over there-ish.
Yeah.
Stay on the East Coast for one or two of those, or a couple of those games in a row. So I could see that, but we'll see what the Brazil game is.
If the Cowboys game is Thanksgiving, I would probably go do that, honestly.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
That would be fun. Go watch Schottenheimer and the Cowboys.
I still cannot believe that that's where they ended up, man. Like,
Yeah.
of all of their like recent, assistant coaches, for them to choose Brian Schottenheimer.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't have convinced Dan Quinn to stay for like one more year and then be the head coach. Like or even you couldn't bring Kellen back or heck, man, even Mike Zimmer. Like, I would take Zimmer over Brian Schottenheimer as head coach. So it's crazy to me that the Cowboys.
Alex strongly disagrees. He thinks Schottenheimer is a great hire.
A good hire for the Eagles.
Correct. Correct.
Yes.
I think that's the layered with sarcasm on that one.
Yeah, Jacob pointing out Jerry just wants his puppet. He just wants to control the guy, and
yeah,
that was obvious from the start. Like, they had Robert Saleh in the building the day before they hired Brian Schottenheimer. Like, I would have gladly taken Saleh over Schottenheimer.
Yeah. Jets are building a good staff, though.
The Jets are building a good staff. I'm surprised that the Lions are letting Tanner Engstrand leave that building, but we'll see. All right, next super chat in here. Athir is back. Says, Tyler, my defense bold prediction: Cam Hart, Tariq still will be the top corner duo in the NFL. 11 interceptions that lead to the top passing defense. Destination San Francisco. Let's go, baby. I'm not scared.
I definitely think one of those two is a starter next year. I feel like you have to, because, but
I think both of them will start the season as starters. Whether they both finish the season, I think, is unfortunately a different conversation.
Mm-hmm. If one is a starter outside, do you feel they will go with Tarheeb still, though?
Yeah, I think Tarheeb still has shown enough in the slot that he would be the starting slot corner for them. Does that lead to him playing, 50 snaps, 60 snaps a game? Maybe not because of Derwin, but I think Tarheeb is a starter at minimum because he can play the slot.
Yeah. Cam Hart, as Catherine mentions, he's got to stay on the field, and it sucks. I hate injuries. Suck. All those things suck. The fact that it was 2 concussions almost back to back, that sucks.
Yeah. It's really frustrating because, I mean, when he got hurt against the Bengals and even against the Texans, like, you saw, like, the defense just changed, and he fits perfectly with what they want to do from a press coverage standpoint. He's physical, plays the run. It's just, you got to find a way for him to stay healthy, and particularly having 2 concussions as a rookie, having another shoulder injury after dealing with that at Notre Dame. It sucks because I had Cam Hart as a top 50 player in the draft last year. And then the shoulder injury was why he ends up falling to the Chargers in the 5th round. But so I still believe that ceiling is there. I still believe he can be at least a high-end corner too. And for the Chargers, I think Tariq has shown that he has that kind of ceiling as well too. So they're in a great spot if Cam Hart can figure out how to stay healthy. And then, if, hypothetically speaking, if Tariq and Cam each take steps forward in their development and you go sign a Carlton Davis, like, that corner trio is suddenly like top 10 in the league, and you feel really, really good about their potential to go into these matchups. But if Cam Hart continues to stay with, struggle to stay healthy, Tariq maybe doesn't hit, as much in year 2, then we're kind of in a similar place. So the Chargers need still to take a step forward, and I think he will. And they need Cam to figure out how to stay healthy, and that's obviously a bigger question mark, unfortunately, right now.
Yeah. Slightly related. We didn't mention it yet. Chris O'Leary going to Western Michigan.
Yeah.
So safeties coach for the Chargers, going to Western Michigan to be their defensive coordinator. Go for it, man. Sounds awesome. Do your thing. Jesse Minter did a similar thing, worked with the Ravens, and then went to Vanderbilt to be their defensive coordinator.
Yep.
I think. And then went to, obviously, with Michigan. So I think O'Leary could be on that track. The Chargers could eventually reunite with O'Leary. Should it come down to another defensive coordinator hire potentially in 2026, but we'll see.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out a reunion here, and good for him. Chasing a promotion. Tough to fault a player, because I think with the Chargers, he's probably in terms of like internal Jesse Minter replacements, he probably was like down the pecking order quite a ways.
Yeah.
But did awesome job. And Tony Jefferson tweeted out that he was his favorite position coach he ever had. Which speaks volumes, because Tony's been in the league for over 10 years and obviously has been in personnel situations as well. So it is a big loss. I mean, Daniel Poppard wrote an article about Chris O'Leary's relationship with Elijah Molden and like being a key reason why Molden picked it up so quickly. And then Marcus May and Eddie Jackson and all these guys who played for the Chargers, like you don't get functional safety play with that amount of injuries without a quality safety position coach. So it is a big loss. I'm curious to see how they replace him. I haven't looked a ton at candidates, but Chris Hewitt was let go from the Baltimore Ravens. Alex has pointed out that his son just committed to Rutgers, and his brother is on that coaching staff. So that might be a situation where he goes and coaches with family, but we'll have to look at some other options. And then actually, before we jumped on, Phil Sercha, who's the offensive quality control coach, I think technically, did tweet out that he is on the move. So the Chargers will be looking for a new offensive quality control coach, which is it's a minor thing, right? I think his role changed when they hired Nick Hardwick to be the assistant offensive line coach. But wish him well. He was obviously kind of more of a college guy. So Chargers will be looking to fill that position as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting one there. And then the Chargers did, so while we're on this, the Chargers did block the Raiders from interviewing and I guess hiring probably Sanjay Lal. Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean, I know that Quentin still has his limitations, right? But took a huge step forward in 2024. Obviously, you don't get a player like Ladd to hit right away without, again, a quality receivers coach. We'll see what happens when he can get kind of more of a bigger position upgrade. We'll see, but the Chargers definitely think very highly of him. I think the role specifically was for like passing game coordinator in Vegas, which technically would have been a promotion for Sanjay Lal. So maybe the Chargers kind of slapped that tag on him for this upcoming season, and then prevent future teams from inquiring about him unless they want him for an offensive coordinator position, which kind of seems a little unlikely given his career.
Yeah, I don't know if they can. Do they have?
Because Marcus Brady is passing game coordinator.
Yeah. So I was going to say, do they have an assistant head coach on the Chargers?
I don't believe so.
So I guess you could do that potentially, but I mean, they kept him. You can block anyone as long as it's not a. I think you can block him for anything that's not a coordinator.
Yeah.
Hire.
Yeah.
So
that is correct.
Yeah, Sanjay Lal, another year. Can't complain. I mean, Ladd McConkey, I loved him, so I didn't think he would suck or anything. But when you break Keenan's record by that much, it's you keep that guy around.
Yeah, no doubt. Scrolling through the chat here, SR Powers asked about Gray Zabel at pick 22. He is the offensive lineman from North Dakota State. He can play all three spots on the interior, and he could play at least right tackle. I wouldn't want him to play left tackle. I think there's some minor pad level issues that get exposed more at tackle, but I think he could survive at right tackle. But to me, this is the best interior offensive lineman that I have studied so far. I don't really think it's particularly close. Could the Chargers take him at 22? That would have to be a scenario where they don't really upgrade the offensive line all that much, and maybe you go out, like if they sign Trey Smith, I think Zabel would be more in play, because then you can't really afford to go sign multiple guys. But Zabel at 22, I just don't think the Chargers can really afford to take an offensive lineman in the first round. Like, I think they have so many other needs and potential strengths that would make it a little tough for me. But a fantastic player. 22 is probably a little rich for me. Like, he's probably more of like a pick in the 40s or 50s for me. But best interior offensive lineman I've studied so far.
Okay. Did you watch Monheim yet or not yet?
I watched his game against LSU. That's the center from USC, for those who don't know. I think he's a day 3 option.
Yeah.
But I think he would upgrade the athleticism department. I do have some anchor concerns. The LSU guys did kind of get him a couple times with power, but quality day 3 option for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Did we get another super chat from here? Okay, we did. Steven, I got a question. When we play the Cowboys, where is Parson lined up this year's difference? We have 2 great tackles. Micah Parsons can line up anywhere. Like, that's what makes Micah Parsons so special. But Parsons is not afraid to go up against the left tackle. Like, he wants that challenge. He wants that smoke. So I do respect that about him. But if he plays the Chargers and Bradley Bozeman is the center, that's where Parsons will
just standing over Bradley Bozeman. That's fair. Yeah. Alternatively, just don't go against the tackles.
Yeah.
Against Zion, Bozeman, and whoever the right guard is.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Brian says we need another Corey Linsley. Unfortunately, that player does not exist in this draft. All due respect to even like Ryan Kelly, like Corey Linsley was special as a center, like truly one of the best of his generation. So that person does not exist this year, unfortunately.
Would be nice. Corey, I miss it. Miss Corey Linsley. Just awful. The whole situation's awful. I mean, I'm glad he's, by all accounts, I think, doing well. But yeah, huge bummer.
Yeah. Wish him nothing but the best. But there was a point in time where the Chargers were getting 1 pressure every 3 games allowed from their center position. Like, it was crazy. Like, I think back to like the way we feel about the Justin Herbert's performance against the Vikings last season. That doesn't happen with a different center, right? Like, Bradley Bozeman was just so locked in from a blitz pickup standpoint, stunt standpoint. Against those kind of schemes, you just can't function as a defense without a center like a Corey Linsley. Like, his mental workload was truly like next level that he was taking on for the Chargers. And even after the Hart stuff popped up, like, we heard that he was, basically a coach for those guys. And Will Clapp like wasn't the greatest center, but even then, like, we still weren't seeing the kind of protection issues that we did this past season. And I think Corey Linsley is a huge part of that.
Yeah, and I think the conversation with Zion would be completely different if Corey were still there. Just consistency as is, but that rookie season was like, oh, okay, you see some good stuff here, and it just never recaptured that, never took a step forward. And I just feel with Corey, you would just been so different.
Yeah. If the Chargers could have gotten Zion to work with Duke a little bit earlier, you keep Corey Linsley healthy and spry, and you bring in this coaching regime, which I do think did a better job with Zion as the season went along.
Yeah.
We're having a very different conversation about that player. And obviously, it sucks that Zion hasn't hit the way that we all would have hoped, but having a guy like Bozeman versus Corey Linsley, like, it matters, man. It matters a whole lot for guards.
Yeah.
Ryan Switzer wants to know if we would be happy with a running back at 22 or disappointed.
Layered conversation. So clearly I'm not going, yeah. Now it depends on who the running back is, potentially. There's only 2 I'm considering there. Obviously, I think one of them will be gone. It's really, this is a, would you be happy or disappointed with Hampton at 22? I think he will ultimately be a top 30, if not top 25 player for me. the Lions have taught me that don't chuckle when you take a running back very, very early. Granted, they had other issues that they needed, and they just happened to get Laporta and Brian Branch in round 2, which good for them. But I don't know, man. Would I be disappointed? The issue is, this is a deep running back class. We saw that in our mock drafts, right? We kept going, oh, we'll wait for running back. We'll wait for running back. And sure enough, there were plenty of running backs we could have taken. I would say disappointed, but disappointed mean. I don't know. I would have preferred other options. I don't know if I would be disappointed.
Listen, man, if Ashton Ginty falls to them at 22, I'm sprinting that card in. I don't think that's going to happen, but given the amount of like edge rushers and defensive tackles and things like that, you know, there are going to be some receivers who go. I don't think it's like totally impossible that Ginty goes, you know, that far down. I think he should go in the top 10. I think he's that special of a prospect, and his numbers are significantly better than even Bijan Robinson's numbers. And I think the film is, you know, Bijan's different, like long speed athlete and different as a pass catcher. But Ashton Ginty to me is a guy who should go in the top 15. Like his film and his numbers are just like truly next level. So if the Chargers get him at 22, like I'm very, very happy with that, because I think that is a, you know, potential top 5 running back in the league right away as a rookie. So if it's Omarion Hampton, I'm happy for the player, but I would be a little disappointed in the resource allocation at 22. If they traded down to like 28, 29 and took Hampton,
sure,
and you give me some extra picks, I think that's probably a different conversation. But if they get Ginty at 22, I like that would be pretty sick. Like if the Chargers hypothetically like do what I said, you get Will Fries, James Daniels in free agency, and then you draft Ashton Ginty. I don't know, man. And you bring back J.K. Dobbins potentially too. I like that run game is going to cook. Like it will. You know, so I think there's a chance that would be, you know, a lot of fun. But yeah, this edge rusher class, this defensive tackle class, the tight end potential, it would be tough for me to go down to RB2 at 22.
If they were offensive weapons or bust and Loveland weren't there, I would like Hampton over the receivers that are probably at that spot.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So if we're like, hey, if they short up a bunch of defense in free agency and it's down to just, hey, let's pick the best weapon available, I'd go Hampton over the receivers, I think, at that point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like Emeka Egbuka a lot, so I think he's probably above that.
Yeah, yes. If he's there, that does, yeah.
Okay, I'm scrolling up a little bit. Interesting. The question about your students or our students, I guess.
I don't see them gambling on sports, and we talk a lot of football, and they would mention it, and they have not mentioned it to me. People are mentioning Luther Burden. I just don't think there's. It seems like he's a top 10, 12 pick.
Yeah. I mean, Luther Burden isn't like my favorite receiver ever. But he's a top 20 guy at minimum. And he's also very slot dependent. So not a real fit for the Chargers. I do think Egbuka could fit. Like I think Egbuka is big enough that he could play on the outside. But he's a guy that does, I think, need to play somewhat in the slot to reach his ceiling in the NFL. Vanessa wants to know if we could see them double dipping at tight end in this draft.
No. I think I would like Stone Smart over the day 3 option they could bring in.
Yeah. I mean, the Chargers will be able to get Tucker Fisk and Stone Smart back. They're both restricted free agents. So those two guys will be very, very cheap. And then you obviously have Will Dissly. Scott Matlock will do some run blocking at tight end as well. I just don't know if there's spots for another guy. You know?
Yeah, so I think in this case, you're probably taking one the first 3 rounds, if not the first 2 rounds, if not the first round. And then it's the third guy. I guess at some point you have enough picks, they have 10, I think, in this class. So
if their comp pick
correct.
hits like they are projected to, they will have 10 picks. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's some interesting tight ends, Brenning Stool from Clemson, the guy from Oregon, who I think is much better than people give credit for.
Ferguson, yeah.
Yeah, I love him. But like Stone Smart, if they remember to use him, like there was a stretch of 4 games where he had 200 yards. I don't know which tight end's walking in and doing what Stone Smart can do.
Yeah.
And Stone Smart, in theory, should take another step forward. So if they just remember that he exists, he could have a nice tight end season for them.
Yeah. If they can get Colston Loveland in this room, I think you feel really good about this tight end room, right? You have Will Dissly, who at minimum as a receiver can do some of the screen game, some of the seam stretching, and you feel good about that role for him. You reduce the overall usage. Then you get Colston Loveland as your true tight end 1 target getter. Tucker Fisk as a blocker is an awesome blocking tight end, and then Stone Smart kind of is your backup pass catcher. I think you feel pretty good about that room. I don't think they need to take 2. If they decided to take like 2 dart throws like later on in the draft, like if you take if you take Brenning Stool, for example, here in round 4, and then you take a round 7 tight end, similar to like what they did with Cornelius Johnson, I'm not like opposed to that. But I think they have enough in the room already where they just need like somebody who can come in and function as a pass catching tight end 1. Unfortunately, that player is only really available in round 1.
Yeah.
Unless you like traded for Kyle Pitts or Mark Andrews or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, people mentioning Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame. He's basically just Will Dissly 2.0. Like it's that role. Like the Chargers need a tight end who can flex to the slot, who can do some of your yards after catch opportunities, actually like work the field on intermediate routes. Like that's why Colston Loveland is a perfect fit, obviously, for who they have, for what they have already. I have not watched the Iowa tight end, Lachey. I don't really know how to say that, but we'll get there.
I've just in my brain, it's Lackey. It's Lachey.
I've heard it pronounced Lachey and Lachey. I've never heard it Lackey. I don't know.
I have no idea. I watch these things, I don't watch the YouTube. I don't listen. I hear nothing when I watch film except whatever music I'm listening to. Okay. Potentially Lachey. Oh, it's Lachey. Wow. Okay. Luke Lachey.
Okay.
Well, he's just bumped up in my grids, whatever they end up being.
This is one of the reasons why I love messaging Thomas, because he always has the pronunciation right. Because it's such an important thing for me as somebody who has his last name mispronounced all the time. So anytime I have a pronunciation question, I know I can count on Thomas to answer it.
I still don't know how people mispronounce your last name.
Oh, dude, I get like Hogland all the time. I get like Hugland. It's and it's Hagland. Like it's really not that hard.
I just start from H and work my way to the rest of it. It seems to be.
I'm like, where did you get an O from? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. But, I get Scoon or even Scahoon, which is interesting, or Schoon.
Scahoon?
Yeah.
Are you Scottish?
I mean, I'm Irish. But yeah, I get those all the time. No one says Skindler's List, but I'm Scahoon or Schoon. It's not that hard, guys.
Scahoon. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Have you finished Jalen Royals from Utah State?
No, 3 games. I wouldn't say I've finished watching Jalen Royals.
Okay. You have enough to have an opinion.
Yeah, I think you and I are on the same page. Where like him, like solid, but I don't love him as much as some do. So I can pull up whatever I thought of him, but I think it was more like a round 3-ish deal. But I don't remember where wide receiver prospects. Jalen Royals. I was looking for a little more than I got.
Yeah. I think if the Chargers didn't really need like an X receiver, like I would be probably a little bit more interested in Jalen Royals for them specifically. Trying to think of who like Jalen Royals reminds me of.
I like his work as a runner. I think he sometimes turns into like a running back. So I think after the catch, not bad.
His after the catch work and jet sweep work is very good.
Yeah. Injured his foot, didn't finish the season. Just good round 3 guy.
Zick Loxy wants to know which Chargers player deserves the most improved award.
Other than Henley, which is probably the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, no. Well, I mean, I wouldn't. Disley doesn't count, but he did have a heck of a receiving season relative to expectations.
Yeah.
Who am I not thinking of? Fulton? Tony Jefferson.
Yeah. If you're talking players who were on the team last year.
Oh, yeah, QJ.
Dude, Scott Matlock, I did not think he was going to be. I don't think he should have been on the roster as a defensive player. Like he objectively not an NFL defensive tackle, in my opinion. So to get him to be, yeah, they felt that way. So to get him to be like a pretty good fullback, I would say is a huge improvement for them. So
yeah,
he's probably who I would say. But Dan Henley went from a guy who couldn't get on the field to one of the best linebackers in the AFC. So the answer is him. But Scott Matlock, I think, becoming a functional, potentially quality starting fullback, I think is worth mentioning as well.
Yeah.
K Rich says hope Brendan Rice develops for us as a contributor at wide receiver.
Me too. I either want him to become an all-pro or be cut from the team so I don't have to hear about this anymore. I want this guy to I just want this guy to either be great or off the team because he's like the most discussed player every week, I feel like. And the team showed you what they felt about him.
Yeah.
I mean, Jalen Reagor.
Yeah. When the team is actively playing Jalen Reagor and Laviska Shenault over you, I don't know, man. And like, I would understand the hype that fans have around him more if he was like awesome in training camp, and he just wasn't. Like Simi Fehoko was miles ahead of him in terms of production, in training camp and in the preseason. So I am rooting for him. I hope he does well. I had a very low grade on him. I did not think he was somebody who, would become this like reliable player. And he was a 7th round pick. Like their other 7th round pick was cut, and he was drafted he was at the college that this regime coached at.
That wouldn't surprise me for sure.
So I think the expectations for Brendan Rice got so out of hand because he's Jerry's kid and he went to USC. I hope I'm wrong about him. I hope he comes in and has an awesome sophomore season, but we need to recalibrate our expectations for Brendan Rice as a fan base. If we're going to expect him to be a consistent contributor because like he has a full offseason or whatever, like no. We need to understand that this is a guy who's going to be fighting for a roster spot, let alone like a actual, consistent role on the team.
Yeah. So hopefully it develops. Anything from him would be great. If his name were Brendan Hogland, then I don't think people would be talking about him.
Yeah. So just don't have a ton of expectations for Brendan Rice. If he exceeds them, great.
Yeah.
Emilio Huerta thinks I'm crazy for saying Jamar Chase is worth $40 million. I think you're crazy for thinking that he's not.
I mean, offseason best. Well, if he's, if that's the route they go, best player and elite player at position gets most money because he's next. That's about where he'll be at. So it's an insane number. I get it. It is a very big number, but let me pull up the
So Justin Jefferson's at 35 a year. CeeDee Lamb got 34 a year. Brandon Ayuk just got 30. Like the receiver market is what it is at this point.
Right.
And if you're Jamar Chase, why wouldn't you push for 40? You know, like
Right.
you saw the value that you have to this team. You know that the quarterback is going to be livid if you let that person leave. Maybe it's not 40 exactly, but I would expect he pushes for that number, you know, given with the way the receiver market is currently standing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jefferson 35. So sure, 37. You're off by 3, so you're crazy.
Yeah, I mean he finished with 1,700 yards and 17 touchdowns this season.
Yeah, he had a good season. The year I finally take another player in fantasy football, it's Tyreek Hill, and it sucked.
J. Paul Paz, late to the party. But do you see a role for Simi/B Rice? We obviously just touched on Brendan Rice, but do you think Simi is back in 2025?
I think he's back, just not guaranteed a spot, as long as by all accounts, the injury is fine at this point. But yeah, I think he'll be back. I don't see where else he'd go. The team had big plans, not big plans, as a run blocker, special teams contributor, the 7th or 6th guy. I think he's perfect. He's a perfect last receiver on your team. And I mean that with respect, like special teams, blocking, fill in for a pinch. You know, you get that catch against Denver. Yeah. You can just stay healthy. Yeah.
I think you bring him back at minimum for like a worst case scenario here is he's your practice squad receiver 1, you know, and you call him up on a few game days a year. I don't know if he'd have like that much of a market, you know, like I think he is somebody who you could bring back on kind of a minimum contract. He obviously is, you know, very friendly with the quarterback, which was a smart decision by him. So I wouldn't hate it. You know, if he's your wide receiver 6 or 7 entering training camp, I think you're in a pretty good spot. What? Mac Jones? Like, is this a real thing that's being pushed out online by the aggregators or what? This might be like all due respect to John. He heard this rumor. Whoever started this rumor, this is the dumbest rumor I have ever heard in my entire life.
I now have to actively look it up where this came from. At dinner in LA. Oh, okay. Well, we entertained it.
No.
There
are 2 quarterbacks in the NFL who could push Justin Herbert. Everybody else is a significant downgrade.
As Alex points out, he does not clear Heineke. Yeah.
No. I'm glad that John,
this is not John's take for what it's worth.
This is not a take that John has, which is great because that would be not very smart, but he heard it. So John, whoever you heard that from, you should tell them that they are peddling something really, really stupid.
I've heard that, you know, Sydney Sweeney thinks Alex is hot. I heard that at dinner once. So congrats, Alex.
He said, thank you. I'm like, F that. Yeah, no. Yeah, that's crazy. The Chargers, their backup position is something that I think will need to be addressed, but I think we had Taylor Heineke in our top 10 free agency show. So I'm in favor of just bringing him back, but I do think they probably are due for, you know, like a day 3 developmental quarterback type of pick. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see if they do go after that. And you mentioned Josh Johnson, but, you know, him as your QB3, I don't really know. Like, what's the point of that?
What did Mac Jones do in the postseason?
If I remember correctly, they got like destroyed by the Bills in his rookie season in the playoffs.
So he had 232 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. I don't recall the context for any of that. Is that even better? I don't know. McConkey had 185 yards himself. That was also 2021.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I don't think we have any more super chats. Jay says, did Henley's play diminish what we saw from Tuli?
Something like we were focusing more on what was going on with Henley and we kind of forgot Tuli, sort of thing.
Sorry. Nice, Alex. That was good.
That's good. Yeah, that'd be something else for sure. Go, have at it, Alex.
Yeah.
Do it, buddy. Did he?
I mean, her and Justin Herbert do share a sponsorship, I guess.
Okay.
The soap. What's it called? Sasquatch?
Oh,
No.
Squatch or whatever.
Dr. Squatch?
Dr. Squatch. There you go. Did Henley's play diminish what we saw from Tuli? No. I just think Tuli was good and a role player and just, what was not as involved.
Yeah, I think coming off the rookie season, we all kind of expected Tuli to take a significant jump forward. And it was a step forward. I just don't think it was as big as everybody was hoping. But, they were asking him to rush against guards a lot. They were asking him to do a lot of pick plays. So they dropped him into coverage a good amount. So I think next year when he is their edge 2, I think we'll see him take another step forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't know where his ceiling is as a pass rusher just quite yet. And that's okay. Pass rushers do generally kind of take a long time to, find their stride, especially when they're not taken in the first round. So at minimum, the Chargers have a great run defender. They have somebody who can give you, 3 or 4 pressures a game when he's a starter. And that's a really high floor edge rusher. If his ceiling is better pass rusher version of Sam Hubbard, that's a really solid NFL career for him. I just don't know if we can really say what his ceiling is just quite yet.
Yeah.
All right. That is, I think, going to do it for us today. Any final thoughts, Tyler?
Good luck, Alex.
Yeah, good luck on your quest for that one. Okay, so we are going to be back next week. Obviously, we are full steam ahead towards free agency and the draft. A little bit of a different schedule. We're going to be live on Monday next week instead of Tuesday. Tuesday, I have a different engagement I have to attend. So we'll be live on Monday and Thursday next week instead of Tuesday and Thursday. And then we'll get back to our normal schedule the week after that. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for us today. Appreciate you so much for tuning in live. If you're watching this on replay, appreciate you as well. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. All that good stuff does help grow the show. This has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. We'll see you later. As always, bolt up.